Alright, for today's critical thought, we're going to be returning to the topic of puzzle design for that part 2 I was talking about. You'll find the previous part linked somewhere around here right now. But the last time we spoke about puzzle design, we focused on adventure, or more specifically point and click philosophy, with the idea of the lock and key method defined or popularized by designer Ron Gilbert. But one of the more interesting aspects, as we saw puzzle design evolve over the last decade, was the idea of action, or more iterating puzzle solutions. This would be games like La-Mulana, Braid, Limbo, many more games, Fez being another good example. The idea is that instead of us dealing with a point-and-click solution, meaning we have a set obstacle, we have a set number of options, just keep going through them until you solve it, we're doing with something that involves both the player's mastery of the rules and mechanics, as well as their own skill involved in being able to perform the task. If you've played games like the Swapper, for instance, that require the player to be able to move around and be able to get into the right position to make use of their swapping device, that would be an example. And even something like the Talos principle, one of my favorite action, I'm not even sure we would call it an action adventure game, more of a puzzle focused game of this decade. But the point is, when we're talking about puzzles that rely on both the in-game rules and situation, as well as the player's knowledge about what's going on, it requires a different process when it comes to defining these puzzles, and more importantly, being able to show them or present them to the player so that they can figure things out. And we talked about this in our last part, but we're going to focus more on these 3 key points about good puzzle design today. And what we're referring to are essentially 3 key questions that the puzzle must present to the player in order for them to be able to grasp it and hopefully extrapolate what the answer is. So the 3 points are: what's my objective? What's stopping me? What are my tools at hand? So I think I may have held up an extra finger there. That's just how my hand lifts up there. But the point is, in order for the player to be able to grasp what it is that they're trying to do, they have to be able to understand what the puzzle is asking of them, and most importantly, what's the end game of the puzzle? What are they trying to get to that they can then say, puzzle solved? In some games, this could be as simple as getting the player from here to here. It could be turning on a light, opening up a door, picking up a star, you name it. But the idea is that there has to be a in-game representation of what it means for this puzzle to be considered clear. And then from there, the player basically has to begin connecting the dots from A to B all the way to Z in terms of what it is they need to do to solve this puzzle. Now, because puzzles, when we talk about this variety, are more about the player's ability along with the in-game knowledge, these puzzles are typically associated around iterating on a solution. And that's one of the big differences between this kind of action-focused puzzle design and when we talk about point-and-click adventure design. In a point-and-click game, puzzles are black and white in terms of their solution. I either have the right key and we move on, I don't have the right key, so we need to keep playing. But when we talk about games that involve the player having to figure out the solution and grow it over time, it becomes more of a learning process, almost like you're dialing it in terms of the solution. This could be such as, I need to know exactly the right velocity to jump in order to get across a gap or get to this point. So I'm going to jump the first time, I go in the pit. I jump the second time, I go over the platform, I fall. Third time we land, okay, now what do I do from there? Or setting up things such as a laser grid, moving items or enemies into a position that you need to work with, things along those lines. But the point is that it's never about you automatically know the solution, 1, 2, 3, we're done, we move on to the next. There's more of a learning process that's involved with it. And because of that, this is why those 3 points are very important. because the player needs to be able to understand that this puzzle that they're in, like pretend my screen here is a puzzle here, that what's there can be solved by the player at this time. If the player doesn't know what they have in terms of their tool set or what is they're trying to achieve, then it's going to make that puzzle a lot harder to solve. Speaking of which, that takes us to our game footage, and I think a few of you know what's about to come up on screen. This is footage of course, La-Mulana 2, which I've been making inches of progress on my own time and streaming. And this is an example of a game that has a really great Metroidvania core, but a really bad or even just incredibly frustrating puzzle design. And the problem has to stem with how the puzzles are built in this game. The puzzle designs themselves are designed around the solution never really being in the same room as the puzzle, and that the puzzles themselves will all make use of different rules in terms of how you can solve them. Some rooms that have puzzles in them will have a blue eye that will basically close once you've solved the puzzle or completed the task, such as in this one. But in other ones, there is no blue eye. And there are sometimes cases where you may not even know that there is a puzzle in a room or a secret way around. The game throws these tablets at you, as you just saw there, to try and give you clues, but here's the dirty little secret. Because the game is built on a non-linear progression, as in the player is free to explore wherever they go, you will find hints that have no bearing on the situation or even the area that you're in. And this is a very big problem. Because, as we said in the last part, the player needs to know what it is they're trying to do and what the tools they have available. In this game, you'll run into puzzles that you won't even be sure that you can solve, let alone what the game even wants you to do. And the game will try and the game will want you to parse a solution out of tablets. But again, if the tablet is not giving you the information that's relevant, how are you supposed to know what the solution is? Now, as you can see, I've been flailing around for this guy for about the last 20 seconds. And the solution to it comes later. In fact, I am going to fast forward just a tad. Where is it? Again, we can spend so many seconds stuck on a puzzle that it's not funny. But if we fast forward here, now I have the solution to this little fight here. Now, I'll let the bar disappear here, but there is no clue along the path that I was on that told me how to fight this guy. And I may do one more fast forward in about a minute if we don't get there through normal running, that the hint to this puzzle is in the room below me. But if I didn't go that way first, I went the other way, how was I supposed to know? Now, I'm sure fans will comment, well, you're supposed to explore. But the game's rule set in terms of how puzzles are solved and introduced is very inconsistent. Some puzzles will guide you right in the room, other ones will just be a random object or something in the room, and you're supposed to come back with a clue from another area to solve it. In fact, that happened in an earlier part that wasn't recorded. That I needed to go to one area to get the clue that I needed to solve a puzzle in a second area, but the item that I needed to solve that was in a third area. Now, right below my character there, you see that tablet? That is the actual clue to the boss fight. But again, if the player is just going by the knowledge of what they're looking at, how are they supposed to solve it? Yeah, now that opens that up, and I'm going to read this tablet right here once I equip the item. There we go. Now, you saw that hint. It said, harness the power of storms to clear the corridor. That was the only hint that you were supposed to get to solve that boss fight that you just watched. Now, how many of you could have put two and two together there? I'm sure not many. I had to look this up. And this is a major problem for a lot of games that don't properly give the player the information they need to solve the puzzle. This is what happens when we talk about strategy guide game design. And La-Mulana was called Spelunky there, but La-Mulana 2 is definitely evidence of this kind of design. There are crazy solutions and rules to this game that you will never figure out on your own unless you're going to spend a lot of time replaying, playing, and playing some of these sections. So here I am going back to another area that again has puzzles to it that I wasn't even sure of how to solve. Speaking of which, you're going to see an example of this in a second as I climb these stairs right here. That corridor right there has to be manipulated in a special way to allow for different paths, but the game gives you no hints about it within the general vicinity of it. I'm sure there may be a hint tablet somewhere in the game that explains what you're supposed to do, or mildly, I guess, goes over it. But it's not referenced within the respective area. So how is the player supposed to understand what it is they're trying to achieve? The answer is they're not. And again, that is the problem with when the developer doesn't properly present these puzzles. So now I'm going to repeat this, drop on down, and we're going to get a powerful item as soon as I try to avoid everything trying to kill me here. But to begin to wrap things up, when you're trying to properly present a puzzle to a player, they need to know what they're trying to achieve, what's standing in their way, and what tools do they have available. Without that information, the player will not be able to properly understand what the goal of the puzzle is, or more importantly, if they can even solve the puzzle now. Because due to this nonlinear progression in La-Mulana 2, you can have those situations where you're just not even sure if this puzzle is solvable or not. You may need an item down the line, but here's the catch. You may not even know what the item or the rules surrounding the puzzle are. So it's kind of like you're trying to learn a language, but your like English to whatever dictionary is missing pages, or it purposely doesn't tell you certain combinations. And while I'm sure people will be saying down below, well, the point is you're supposed to explore and figure things out. But if the player doesn't have a proper frame of reference to begin with, then how are they supposed to begin to grasp the concepts? A good puzzle, when you've solved it, should make the player feel good about themselves. They should know that, the developer expected something out about me and I figured it out. But when the player doesn't get all the information they need and it just feels like they're jumping through hoops, it's not really about the player learning or growing. This is a huge difference, for instance, between a game like La-Mulana 2 versus something like Space Chem or Infinifactory from Zachtronics. In those games, the puzzles test you, but they also ask you, or they challenge you to grow your own knowledge, so that when you've solved the puzzle, you're going to be better at the game than you were before going into it. But with a case like this, and I'm just flailing around trying to solve things, when I get a solution, it doesn't really mean much to me, because what did I learn that I'm going to be able to make use of for the next puzzle, or the next? And when you throw in death traps on top of that, that just adds in a whole different wrinkle, but that's a topic for another time. So, last time I asked you what are some of your least favorite puzzles designed around lock and key. For this one, I want to ask you what are your favorite puzzles that are built around essentially player action, or let's just call them iterating solutions. So games like the Talos Principle, Braid, The Watcher, stuff like that. Let me know in the comments below. But otherwise, thanks for checking out this video. If you'd like to suggest a topic for a future one, let me know in the comments below. But check back for daily discussions on game design here, and on game wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games. Before we get to the credits, just a quick shout out to the supporters over on patreon.com/GWBycer. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to check back for our regular streaming, most nights at 9:30, 10 EST, and you'll find a schedule linked down below. For a collection of my writings as well as audio casts on design, you'll find that at game-wisdom.com. Be sure to follow me on Twitter at GWBycer. If you're interested in hanging out and talking about game design topics, we have a Discord channel with the basic tier open to everybody, and that is linked down below as well. If you'd like to support us on Patreon, it is at patreon.com/GWBycer. Your support can help to keep things going and growing, and you can earn rewards such as ad-free versions of our talks, votings for our specific Let's Plays and grab-bag streams, and more. But that's it for now. Thanks again for watching. I hope you come back for more great discussions on design here and on GameWisdom.com, where we examine the art and science of games.